Greek word. And you say, well, why is that Greek word there? This is a Hebrew Bible, right? I mean, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, every bit of it. So you go like, well, how did that happen? See, that's another one of these questions. Now, did King James say Ecclesiastes? Man, that's interesting. Right? But that's Greek, and that comes out of the Septuagint. See, that's the Septuagint translation of that. So this is the kind of stuff you get into. So that's the kind of, oh, yes, well, yeah, well, look, I sat right where you sat. Except probably you have a lot more information than I ever had when you sat down under teaching. Because I was a blank. I didn't come into Christianity with anything from God. You know what I'm saying? I didn't understand. I never didn't have a Bible. Wasn't interested in it. Wasn't not interested. It just wasn't. I wouldn't have spent money on the Bible. I couldn't read it. So, but anyhow, Ecclesiastes. So you find all these kind of things, and it's kind of interesting. Ecclesiastes. Yes, we'll come in, people. Drink a car or a boat? A boat. We're in the book of Ecclesiastes. If you read the book and don't understand why the writer wrote the way he wrote, the book could be pretty depressing. Right? Your son, that's what your son got from it, didn't he? I mean, yeah, if you don't tell him what the book's about so that you make sense of it, it could be a very depressing book. Because the guy who wrote it, when he wrote this, came out of a part of spiritual depression. I mean, he was pursuing all these things without God. He knew better, but he did it anyhow to see if he could find God out there somewhere other than in his soul. You know what I mean? And he was already saved, so he shouldn't have far to look for God, right? Right? Now, your friends that don't know God, they're out there looking for him somewhere. But, you know, they won't find him apart from Christ, right? No man comes to the Father except through, you know where that's from?
John 14:6.
I love that. Thank you, Bubba. You right at the head of class today. So we're in the second chapter today, because this is our third lesson. We did an introduction to chapter 1. Now we're into chapter 2. In chapter 2, we will do maybe 3 studies out of Chasing the Wind, out of chapter 2. Probably the book of Ecclesiastes relates to the average person more than any book in the Bible, because it talks about life. It talks about pursuing pleasures or happinesses without God. And sometimes the writer's going to show you, even if you're pursuing good things without God, even if you're pursuing, it's vanity. It's emptiness. It's an empty pursuit without God. God is what brings meaning to your life. So if you try to do it without God, it's what? It's vanity, or what was your word last week? Meaningless. Right? Which is a good translation of that. Vanity, a Hebel, Hebel, the word, Hebrew word, could be translated, it could be vanity, it could be meaningless or futile. It's just it's a futile pursuit. So it's just kind of interesting. Today we're going to look at a different Hebrew word. It's on your paper. You see it? Now remember that when you read Hebrew, you start from the left, you start from the right and go to the left. So see what looks like a W? That's the first letter of the word. And see where the dot is? If it was on the first line up, it'd be an SH, but if it's on the back side, it's an S. That's where I got my S. And see the dot underneath it? In Hebrew, that's an I. See the next letter? That's an M. That's a shawa underneath it, and you can add it, or it just means there's a break in the word. Sometimes you can add it if it makes you pronounce it better. Then see these next two, and a jot and tittle. In Matthew 5, where Jesus said, the word of God, not a jot nor a tittle. So shall leave the word of God, right? Well, see that letter that looks like an H? I don't know, it looks like a chair, right? Now look at the next one, and that's CH, by the way. Look at the next one. What's the difference between those two? There's a gap up there. See that? See at the top, there's a gap. See that gap? That makes that an H. The jot and the tittle business. A jot and a tittle. They're just Hebrew ideas, but not even the slightest air of putting a Hebrew letter down. Isn't that something? And see, you could easily miss that, couldn't you? Yeah, you could miss a CH from an H. Simcha is here now. Pleasure of my life. So simcha is the word pleasure on your paper. Do you have? Did you get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Boy, did we get that right? I said do 15. I used to say 20, but I've lost my optimism. So I gave you the Hebrew word for pleasure. Agreed? You already know that. Rhonda. So we're in the second chapter, verses 1 through 11. Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll get into our study. I was waiting on Rhonda to show up. She said she'd be late. Anybody got prayer requests? Okay. Wait a minute. I got it. Hey, Jackie, would you pray for us today? Yeah. Okay. She's going to take requests to have prayer.
So, yes, I would really appreciate prayers because I'm super,
I understand that.
don't like surgery, don't like anesthesia.
Yeah. Well, you want to do it without it?
No.
Okay. I'm just asking. Anybody else?
Joel.
Oh yeah, Joel.
Family.
Bring that back up.
Yeah, we have a Zoom Bible study on every other Monday. Joel, this past Monday, said that his mother was even on the Bible study, and they were talking about that they weren't going to leave.
Whew. They live in Florida and Tallahassee. If you've kept up with the news, they're going to get crushed.
Yeah, a lot of those diehard Florida people.
I know.
I don't know why.
Okay.
But
Well,
they have a place to hunker down.
we pray for those people that don't have good sense as well as those who do. We can do that. Yeah. Here's another one.
A friend of mine, one that's friend, wants us to pray for. Words mean a lot to me, right? Anyway, she wanted us to pray for her sister, Karen Meeks is her name, and she had open heart surgery, but she's at Lakeshore. She is an amputee. A few years ago, when the Ford Explorers had that problem one time, she flipped 15 times and had to have her leg removed above the knee and all. And so she said, please pray for her, and also the fact that she's the one, Karen is the one taking care of their mother with Alzheimer's, that has Alzheimer's. So bring it on, pray for her. Yes, pray for her to a good recovery from the open heart surgery. Oh, and she said too, she's not been able to sleep. And so for her to get some good sleep. Because you know when you're in a place that keep kind of in the hospital.
Oh, yeah, hospital. Oh, yeah. All right.
But she's moved to Lakeshore now.
And this lady's taking care of her mother who is,
Yes, here she is, an amputee and taking care of her
well,
mother.
well, there's a word.
So she really needed, but I asked her, and she said, oh yeah, she is a strong believer.
Pray for Carly's salvation. Carly's salvation.
Okay, well, good.
I've got one math test coming up.
Math test. Well, there you go.
Oh,
I'm struggling pretty hard on it. So.
oh. Which math is it?
Algebra 1.
Yeah.
So it's gonna continue to get harder. But
Yep.
Well, never be ashamed to ask for help in tutoring if you need it, son. Do what you can, but don't ever hesitate when you're over your head to ask for help. Because your teachers and staff in there, they got people to give you help. And sometimes it's really simple in math to get help because you can't see how that could all work. When they went to the power system,
Exponent.
5 with the power of 6 or something, I mean, I was done. That was done. But anyhow, okay, math test. We can be there, but when you need help, go get it. That's what the school system, a good system, and you're in one. They'll do that. Okay, Jackie, thank you. And Jackie's heading out Saturday. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll see if Atlanta comes out of that water thing to get you out of here. All right.
I'm going to pray for that.
Yes.
Well, Father, we come before you, and Father, we praise your name for who you are. We thank you for your character, that you are unchanging, and Father, you have a great plan of grace for us. Father, thank you for prayer, that we're able to come to the throne of grace, where you say we can receive grace to help in time of need. Father, there have been several requests stated today, and we lift them up to you right now. I lift up Rose's surgery to you. I pray for the skill of the surgeons. I pray for an absolute perfect recovery for her, that it will do what it needs to do, and I pray for her great peace amidst this, that she knows you're in control and that you love her and you're going to take care of her. Father, we pray for families that we know that are in the Tallahassee area. We pray for Joel's family. We pray for Scoot Ward's family. Father, it would be our desire that, Father, everyone be spared. Father, we just pray for these specific families, that they will be protected and their homes will be protected, and that there will not be the devastation that there could be. Father, I pray for the Atlanta airport too, as I'll be going out of there on Saturday. Just pray for just that the flight will go. All the flights will go. Pray for protection, just for all the people involved in this the hurricane. I pray for Fran's friend who has had open heart surgery. Father, I pray for recovery for her, that your healing hand will be upon her, and that it will just be, her heart will just work just better than it ever has before. We pray for sleep, Father, for this lady. It is so difficult in a hospital. They're coming in all the time. So, but we just pray that you put your hand upon that, and that she is able to get some sleep. And we pray for the caregiver in this situation to give her the strength and the dependence on you, and that she would know your sufficiency. Father, we pray for Carly's salvation. The Holy Spirit would make the gospel very clear, and that she would have a receptive response. And Father, we pray for Ryan's math test. We've all been there, been there and done that. But I pray that he would study really well. Pray that he would give him the concentration, and if it would be a good thing that he finds someone to help him a little bit with that, that you would provide just the right person. Father, thank you that there is, we pray for big issues and we pray for smaller issues, but they're all important to you. If it matters to us, it matters to you. So we trust you with all these things, and we lift these all up in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Now, this, when we get into the first 11 verses here, the writer Solomon is not teaching us that pleasure is wrong. He's going to deal with a lot of things here. It's worldly. It's not necessarily wrong. It's worldly when you do it, when you pursue these things without God. Then it's worldly. I mean, all these things are given to us as gifts. And so the writer here, when he talks about this, he says, let me just get you into the first 11 verses. Pay attention to how he starts verse 2 up when he says, I said to myself. What do we call that? Talking to yourself, right? We all do that, don't we? We talk to ourselves. We'd be smarter to talk to ourselves before we let it out of our mouth, don't you think? Sometimes that would be good to catch it before it comes out. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself, and behold, it too was vanity or futility. For example, he said, I said of laughter, it's madness, and of pleasure, but what does it accomplish? Then I explored my mind, how to stimulate my body, like with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do so under heaven a few years of their life. Then I engaged myself into works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself. I planted them all kinds of fruit tree. I made ponds of water for myself, from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. A lot of them were fruit. I bought male and female slaves. That would be servants. In other words, he engaged in employment. Also, I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. In other words, he was feeding ego, wasn't he? I mean, he was keeping up with status. Also, I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers, entertainment world, and the pleasures of men and many concubines. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Israel. My wisdom also stood by me. All my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was a reward for my labor. But this is what I discovered. When I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, behold, all was vanity and a chasing or striving after wind, and there was no profit or an advantage under the sun. There was no profit or advantage to me under the sun. Those aren't bad things, right? I mean, he threw himself in his work, did well, accomplished much. But in the end, when he looked back at it and what did it contribute to me in my own mental health and my own state? And he said, I discovered that it was just vanity. It was just chasing the wind. I got notoriety, I got publicity, I got wealth, I got a lot of things. And none of them, because I pursued all these things without God. God is what brings the real meaning into your life about these things. And so the writer is going to do that. I want to show you how he wrote this. That's what I want to do. I want to show you how he wrote it. I mean, we can all read it, but sometimes we read and don't study. So I want to show you how he wrote so you can study it. Solomon is not teaching us that pleasure is wrong. That's obvious. He's not teaching it. But what he is teaching is pursuing it without God is like chasing the wind. In Proverbs in 21:17, he who lives with pleasure without God engaged in it will become a poor man. He will love wine and oil and will not become rich. When I read that, very in my early years of my Christianity, I remember my grandfather, when I was a very small child, tell me this proverb. He said, a rich man is one whose money works for him while he sleeps. I didn't understand that as a little bitty kid until he explained it from a farmer's perspective. I was a farm kid. And we would go out and plant, and then we'd have to wait for the rains to come and for it to come up and then grow up, and then we'd harvest it. That was a whole lengthy period before we ever got to the profit of it. And so it made sense to me when my grandfather said that. He said, well, when we plant the corn, we do this, that, and that, and then we get a crop and that. So while you're sleeping, it's growing. So that made a lot of sense to me. And so I made that part of my life. That became part of my financial life when I was about 5. And when people would say, well, what do you want for your birthday this year? Well, I asked them, well, how could I do that? He said, well, there's a bank, and the bank has a saving place, and you can put your money in there and earn interest on your money. I said, well, like what? And so he gave me an example. I went, well, back in that days, you could actually get interest on your money in the bank. That's how old I am. And so I asked for money. And you're really good. I don't want to give you money. Well, I want to put it in the bank. And he told me I had to have $25 in order to open an account. So I was at $25, so I could go. So one day we walked in the bank and I opened it. I was so proud. I was about 6. When I finally gathered enough money for my birthdays to get $25 to open the bank account. Well, it wasn't long. I had $2,000 in there. Because I discovered something. I could work, earn money doing jobs. Instead of asking people to give it to me for my birthday, I asked my grandfather, how can I make some money? And he told me how I could make money on farm. So I pursued that. When I got money, I stuck it in the bank. Because I knew when I slept, it would work and I'd be rich. Right? Because a rich man, his money works for him when he sleeps. That made so much sense to me. And it set me off into a financial way of life. It set the course for my life. No matter what I made, I always put some away in the bank. Or when I got smarter, I invested it in other things. Right? I'm just telling you, this is how Solomon thinking. This is how Solomon thinking. I did all that without God, but I had a great grandfather. My grandfather was just wise with me. So I want to talk about 6 things today about this idea of chasing the wind of pleasure. The word pleasure is used 3 times. Did you notice that? It's used 3 times in my lesson. I put it on your paper like I always do to spoil you. And I broke down this idea into the 11 verses. I broke these 11 down into 3 sections of pleasure. That's my point one. For example, the test. I will test myself, he said. Right? I will test myself. I said to myself, come now, self. So he does that. He does that up there. Then he does it again in verse 2, doesn't he? Which opens up another section. Verses 2, he tests myself with pleasure. That he found that was futile. And so in verses 2 through 9, he comes back to that word pleasure. And he runs it all the way through verse 9. And he said, what did I learn from that? Futility. Not utility. Futility. And then verses 10 and 11. See, we find that in verse 10 and 11. We find that again. See in verse 10, the word pleasure. Right? And then verse 11 makes a conclusion. He draws a conclusion from this, from pleasure. So there are a couple of things that are interesting. So you look for things that are being repeated. Now that's, this is why if you have a study Bible, it says the futility of pleasures and possessions. See that? See that, Rhonda? You would love that because it's got two P words.
Yeah.
Right? Pleasure and possession. Let me show you something that's kind of interesting in the Hebrew language. He says, I said to myself, come and enjoy yourself. We all say that to ourselves when we're about to get in trouble. Right? The word come is a cal imperative. He's commanding himself to go do this. Well, have you stopped to think about it? Yeah, but I'm just going to do it anyhow because I'm looking for pleasure. So that word "come" is a cal, like in the Greek that would be a present tense idea. But this is what we call, but that's an imperative. He commands himself. I mean, how many times you've done this when you go like, well, I work and I'm going to treat myself today, right? I'm going to treat myself today. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to get me a new dress. I'm going to get me I've been wanting this fancy hat. I'm going to go down. We do command ourselves to do some things for ourselves, do we not? Until you get married, Sam, until you get married, then that's off the plate. Then that I did. Now you gotta get permission. So the other word that's important is the word enjoy. See that? Come now, test yourself for pleasure, and enjoy is a command. He commands himself to do two things. One is to get out there and enjoy your pleasures, right? Right? He's talking to himself. Did he not say, I said to myself? Right? See, the worst person you can talk to about things in your life is you. Right? If you want some counsel, don't stay where you are. Don't ask yourself, well, do you think we ought to do that? Because you'll talk yourself into it. He did. And listen what he found out, verse 11. Watch what he said. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor where I exerted, and behold, all was vanity. It was chasing the wind, and there was no profit in it for me. I said to myself, come on, let's go out there and just have some good time. Right? And he said, I did it. Whatever my heart wanted, whatever my eye saw, I just went and got it. I hope my boy here is listening to all this, because that's teenager life right there. I can tell you that. Well, so I put down keywords for Rhonda. He said, I'm going to go test myself. There was a great teaching lesson in it for him. And what he found out was about, in the end, pleasure. I didn't get what I wanted. I thought I would just get a lot of enjoyment out of that, but it was just an empty pursuit. It didn't give me what I was really looking for. And then in verse 10 and 11 is his testimony, right? Futile, he said. It was futile. Futile was empty, is empty, an empty pursuit. See, he makes a doctrinal point. He goes through this whole thing about, I said to myself, come on, let's just get out there and hang out. Let's just do what we want to do. I could do that. I'm the king. I can do whatever. No, kids, you do everything you want. Well, I can if I want to. How about God? What? Well, what about God? Did you learn nothing from your father, David? Just because you're king don't mean you can do everything. Because you know who gave you the kingship? He didn't get it any other way but God. How did you get your kingship? Solomon? God. Well, why is he in the back seat? How come he's not driving the car? So he makes a doctrinal point in verse 11, doesn't he? So you never miss that. See, when Solomon writes, he's going to tell you what he explored, like he did here, and then he's going to tell you, and let me tell you the bottom line. It didn't elevate my life or lift my life up at all. I went through all this stuff, and when I got through looking at all, there was no advantage to me. See, the word profit is the word advantage. There was no profit, no advantage. It was empty. I thought it would just bring me happiness. I thought it would bring me so much joy. I was looking to enjoy myself. Enjoy. Right? You know it's made up of two words, don't you? He didn't say joy. He said enjoy. That there would be something in that pleasure that would just max me out. You understand it? Enjoy. He didn't say joy. He said enjoy. That in that joy, I would find fulfillment in my life. No. That education ain't going to do it. That automobile ain't going to do it. That ain't not going to do it. No. That job ain't going to do it. No. God, who puts the joy in you to enjoy. You don't get enjoy without it. You get in misery. That's what you get. The second thing I want you to notice about this passage, and I'm just introducing you to the way the writer writes. Solomon explored 5 areas of pleasure, worldly pleasure, because he did it without God, in our lesson text. In verses 1 through 3, he talks about alcohol. I wanted to stay with W words, so I started with what the Bible said, wine. Okay? And what was his purpose? Well, I want to find some enjoyment. All right? And I'll tell you, a good glass of wine. He said, I liked a good glass of wine, but at the end of the drinking, I found nothing fulfilling in it. It didn't change my life any more than water, and probably water had more to do with it because I'm mostly water anyhow. So I'd be drinking water. You do know most of your body is water. Okay. In verses 4 through 6, he talks about work. And he talks about work and innovation. I mean, he enlarged, he said, I enlarged my work. I built, I planted, I did ponds, I did parks, I did gardens, I did trees. I got into irrigation. I got into all kinds of innovation and did really well with all of it. I had beautiful parks. I had beautiful box. I did all that and thinking I would get, come now, let's enjoy, right? Every time, come, let's enjoy. And yet I did it all. And then I wound up in verse 11. Agreed? None of this is bad. These are all good. But he was thinking he would get enjoy from it. I will get enjoy from it. I only found out it was just a lot of work and achievement. Everybody went, oh, I love your garden. I love your pond. I love your trees. I love this. I love that. And he went, I didn't. I got nothing from it. that I was looking for. I got nothing that I was looking for. 'Cause what was he looking for? Come now, he said to himself, let's enjoy. And so he tried something else. He tried Wall Street. He got into possessions. He said, I took it, I anything my eyes saw and I wanted, I did. I got it. All my in verse later he says, all that my eyes desired. Holy mackerel. That's got to be an open check account. Huh? All your eyes desire you can get. He's about 30. Well, your eyes can see a lot, can't they, at 30? Well, mine did. Well, in verse 8, he went to wealth. He went to wealth. Instead of possessions, he went to wealth. He became a collector of wealth, silver and gold. He invested in entertainment, got heavily involved in entertainment, got heavily involved with women. This is the king in 1 Kings 11:3 that had 300 concubines and 700 wives.
We're good.
I mean, 7. Huh? Let's see, I'm not good at math. This is not algebra. How many women is that?
Right. 700.
700 and 300. Yeah, there you go.
One's plenty.
Do I? One.
One's plenty.
Well, that's what God thought.
Yeah.
He had 300 concubines. I don't know what they're for. And 700 wives.
Yeah.
I mean, he might have been a Diddy before Diddy came into the world with a 300 concubines and oil. Think how much oil that was. Well, anyhow, I watch too much TV, don't I? Way too much TV. That's what my son Billy tells me. You watch way too much television. I said, well, I could stop talking to you then. He said, if that's what that means, I don't know. Well, you know what all these women did to his life? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. All that because he was a collector of women. He wanted one from this nation and one from that nation, and now one from this one. And I didn't know there were that many nations. I mean, he was collecting women like he did silver and gold. In the end, they got him. Oh yeah, they got him because he chose to follow their gods. These were not converted women. He allowed them to keep their own gods in his kingdom under his rule, much like Ahab. And it brought him to a premature death.
He chose unwisely.
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 Oh, I was really impressed with the first idea. I was really impressed.
Smart too.
Yeah. Well, he's learned how to work the system. That's what. Work the system. Work the system, big guy. Well, you can work the system. So then he in verses 9 and 10 he goes for world renowned. He became famous for not only for all the things he had, but for his wisdom that God gave. See, God gave him all these things, right? He wanted him. God said, okay. And what he found out was verse 11. In all of these activities, None of them brought joy in him. You're right. I want to come. Let's enjoy. And it was in the end, it was all empty in him. So I find all that just kind of interesting to me. And so I gave Rhonda last W. I gave you women. That was a W. And then washout. This was a washout in verse 11, wasn't it? It's an empty pursuit. Well, anyhow, she likes all these W's. She likes that. I call it homiletical points, but she likes them. I know. If I knew yours, I'd give yours sometime, but she talks to me all the time. Point number 3. The content of Ecclesiastes come from a time in Solomon's life when he was in a frantic search for pleasure. Agreed? That's what we're talking about today. Without God. Without God. I didn't care what you're pursuing. Without God, it's an empty pursuit. I can tell you that right up front. Well, I want to be the best football player. I want to be the best basketball player. I want to be the best this and that. Well, then if you do, you need to take God along with you. Because you're going to be mediocre otherwise. If you don't take God with you, then you'll find no enjoy in it. Be an empty pursuit. He's in a frantic search for what? Yeah, but a frantic search, what is he searching for tonight? Where's he looking for it? Pleasure, right? He's looking for it in pleasure tonight. He had forgotten that God is interested in giving the spiritually advancing believer the pleasures of life at the appropriate time. Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, talks about that. You know this very well. There's an appointed time for everything. There's a time for every event. Did you know that? You know, that's when I read that many years ago. I started keeping a journal. A week. I do it. I buy a yearly calendar that I can write in. You know, that's my appointment sheet. Then it has another sheet where what did you do on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays or what events? And I that's where I document what went on in my life that day. Look at what. There's an appointed time for what? Everything. And there's a time for every event. And I thought, well, what do I know? I haven't kept up with that. I wonder if that's true. That is an amazing, when you, at the end of the year, when you sit down and go back to it, you forgot a lot of that stuff. You go like, oh, I remember that. Oh, what an encounter that was. I mean, God walked into that event and whoa. And they're everywhere. These are everywhere. Look, you're about to go get your eye done or something, right? I don't. Okay. Take God with you. That's an event. Now listen to what he says to you. Watch what he says. There's an appointed time. Now you think it's a doctor's appointment. There's an appointed time, right? You're on schedule for surgery, right? This is an appointed time with God, right? This is an appointed time with God. Listen, and the event, we know what the event is in that time. We know what that is. Pay attention to everybody that messes with you. Everybody who's engaged with you in that event. You pay attention to that because you could well and document. My wife, when she was going through heart stuff and she was in the hospital, there was this little lady that came in every evening and cleaned up under her bed and all that kind of stuff. And so my wife was one of those cheerleading people she would just brag on her, what a job you did and this and that. And so the little lady just got where she wanted to spend a little time with her, because most of the time she went into rooms, as she told my wife, people are grouchy and grumpy and they don't want to talk. And if they do, it's always bossy and all that stuff. She said, I can't wait to come here every evening because it's just a joy to be a part of this. It's because my wife just propped up and everything. And my wife did that so that she would take a moment with my wife to listen to her. And my wife told her about the gospel of Jesus Christ and what it was all about, right? And this little lady breaks down and cries. And she said, you're the first person, I'm a believer, she said, but you're the first person I've ever met in this hospital as a patient or a staff person that even gave any identity from their life for Christ. That's amazing to me. See, there's an appointed time and an appointed event in that time. And you always look for it. Always look for it. Always look for it. I went to a doctor one time because my doctor sent me to him and said, I think you're something wrong with your heart. I mean, like the one pump blood or what? Yeah, the one pump blood. Okay, because my other heart's okay. You got two hearts? Was that easy? Was that easy? Yeah, I've got two hearts. The doctor said, I don't think so. I said, I know so. And so we were off to the races. How simple was that? Was he easy picking? That was too easy. So I always look for that stuff. I learned that from this passage out of Ecclesiastes 3. Says there's an appointed time, and he goes through all this. Appointed event in that time. And boy, when you start doing that and you keep up with it, your calendar, you go back and read that end of the year, you go like, whoa, what a year I had. What a year. What a year. Write this down in your paper because I don't think I wrote this down. Write down, because this is important to this, write down Ephesians 5, 15 through 17. And look for this. Later, when you read this, remember it's connected to Ecclesiastes, appointed time, appointed event. When it says this, redeem the time. That's where it says, redeem the time that you have in the plan of God. Redeem the time that you have in the plan of God. Redeem the time. See, that's always seen. This may be just an appointment and an event, and it may not be. Because that's been set up somewhere in my life for some reason. I think I'm there because of my eye. I might be there for my eye and a whole lot of other things. Okay? And I always ask people, hey, the nurse, I say, is there anything I can pray for you about? They go like, what? You're the one going into surgery. I know, but is there anything? I'm praying about that about you. I mean, I'm going to surgery with you. I'm just wondering if there's anything you got that I need to pray about so we can go through and have a good day in surgery today. I mean, if you're having marital problems and all whacked out, and you're nerved up and you're on pills, I need to know something about that. Let me have some prayer here. I'm probably a different kind of patient than most people are. Solomon, like many believers, makes the mistake of trying to find happiness and satisfaction from pleasure without engaging God in it. I mean, it's an empty pursuit. Of your life, when it's through, it will be empty. You know it's empty. You didn't get what you thought you was from it. Right? Didn't carry you to the next day with any kind of joy. So give your servant, here was Solomon's prayer early in his life. He said, so give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of you? That's 1 Kings 3:9. That's that famous prayer that this is a famous prayer that Solomon prayed and God answered. listen to God's answer to that prayer. God promised Solomon that he would be the source of, that God would be the source of great blessings to his life. If, see, there's always an if. If you walk in my ways, if you keep my statutes, and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will what? Now watch this. I want you to go to Psalms 90, verse 10. Let me show you something. I'm going to show you something about Solomon. You have it? Yeah? With the big boy? Oh, yeah. Read a little loud now because I got to pick it up here so people. I mean, for those who are visiting, we're in Psalms 90, verse 10.
As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years.
What? How many? Okay. You can write that down and say, I got 70. All right. What else?
Or if due to strength, 80 years.
Oh. And if you have a widow of good health, I'll give you 80. Right?
Yet their
Wait
pride,
a minute. You can get it. Some of us are there. You can get into the 80s. Right? Some of us are going to go longer than that. But this is, if you walk with God, he'll give you 70. Right? He'll give you 70. And if you take care of yourself, right? And can do the work that the Lord has called you to do, I'll give you 10 extra years, right? Well, suppose at the end of that period, you're still going good. Right? You could reach out there and grab a couple more years, couldn't you? All right, I'm just saying. Do you have any idea? Listen to me now. You got 70, right? Right, those babies. I got, he promised me 70 and 80, right? 80. Most everybody you know, they're good people. They died in that period, right? Not me. I'm on the long haul. But who knows? I mean, I don't care. I'm past 70 and I'm past 80. When I pass 90, I'm going da 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 da. But the point is, what age do you think Solomon died at? You got a lucky guess? Could win the lottery with this.
Well, if you read your paper here.
No! Did I put that down? Did I put that down?
Died age 61.
He did. He died at the age of 61. Now, you're not going to find that in the Bible. If you look for when he died and give his age, no. You got to be a student of King Solomon. You got to know when he was born and how many years he reigned. And he gets 61. Well, how about that? He died short of the promise, didn't he? You know why?
100 women.
Who said that? Of course you did. That's absolutely right. Put your money on Dennis. That's absolutely right. It's recorded, if I'm right, it's recorded in 1 Kings 11, 1 through 8. I don't know if I put that on the paper or not. I might have a couple dollars. Who's going to win the game Saturday, Alabama or Georgia? I might. might have a couple dollars for that. I only want one guy to tell me. That's the guy who hit this thing. Yeah. So, well, Fran says don't do it. Fran says, all right. Isn't that interesting? Wine and women. These women are the way. If you read First Kings 11, that passage is going to tell you that. It don't mention the wine, but that probably had something to do with wine and women. New sermon.
Yeah.
You just put a new sermon in my soul. Wine and women. I'd take that at college campus. I could do that. Well, anyhow, point number 4. What happened to Solomon? I gotta get out of here. My goodness, I'm keeping you people. What happened to Solomon, the wisest man in the world? He thought, man, I'm stuck now in wine and women. Absolutely, we got him. But deception of the mind is what got him. Deception in the mind. It got Eve. It got Lot and his wife. The story of Lot and his wife. I put them on your papers. So let me close because I got my young man here. So let me close this out because I'm over time anyhow. And you can read these things. You probably know them anyhow. Solomon closed the book of Ecclesiastes. He closed it speaking to young people. I found that to be really interesting. And we all do that. We try. My grandfather was great for that. Trying to head the young people off to make the mistakes that you've traveled and done, or your friends have, or your people have. So you try to get to young people. Now I don't know how much you listen. Apparently you got to get to them early, like my grandfather did when I was 5. But he writes this in chapter 12. He writes, "Remember God in your youth," and he covers it in 8 verses. Right? And this is a message to youth, like Ryan and me. See, I'm in my second childhood. I guess I could. So, Ryan, I wrote that down. I was going to close this out. I am right now, but I want to give that for you. See, a message to the young people. I mean, you're right there, and you have a ministry to them. And pay attention to the word remember, because you're 15, and when you're out here at 20, you're going to look back and you're going to remember. There's once you begin to remember things, you start walking down memory lane. And this is what he's talking about. He uses this word remember twice. Always look for things he repeats. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. Days of your youth. Didn't say years. Say days. It's only later when you think of years. I think years. I don't think. Before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you say, "I have no delight in living." See, he's talking about the days in them, the days we're living. I mean people. I mean, sometimes people 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. I just have no reason. I just would like to die. I have any reason to live. No, what do you mean you don't have any reason? You don't have any reason to die, that's for sure. Man told me here a while ago, "Well, I'm not going to believe the gospel." I said, "Yeah, but you're going to die and the choices aren't good. There's no choice after you die. The choices are before. You can determine where you're going to go whether you go on vacation or go to hell. I mean, come on, guy." Anyway, I'm not afraid of hell. I said, "Well, okay, then let me tell you what to do. Go on, lady, if you don't want to live anymore, let me tell you how to do it. You go out there, you get in your car, you fill it up with gas, throw the lighter on it, and that's welcome to hell." Now, I wouldn't want him to do that, right? I'd like to see him get saved. But this idea that you're a big boy and you wear big boy breeches and you're going to be okay in hell isn't true. There's no britches that big. But anyhow, and so he talks about it. Remember him before the silver cord is broken. You know what that is? Watch this now. This is all about dying. Different ways of discussing death. The silver cord is broken. The golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher of the well is shattered. The wheel at the cistern is crushed. And then your body, see, that's just the principle of dying. Then your body or the dust will return. Say your body's made of dust and will go to dust, it will return. And your spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity, vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. And so it is. Well, anyhow, I've run out of time. I've run out of your time. So let's close in prayer. Thanks for coming, people. And tell me one thing you learned today.
Chasing and not pursuing the world, pursuing it.
Okay.
And that I won't find enjoyment in the world.
There you go. Then if you talk long enough, we get around all of it. That's what we ought to be. That's what we ought to be learning out of there. And it don't matter. You can pursue good things. There were a lot of good things here that he pursued and did well with. Without God, it's empty. He said, I'm telling you, without God, it's empty. Father, we're so thankful for Solomon's truth. He brings this book and he says, listen, this is what my life was like without God. What is your life like? You have God. Is it fulfilling? Is your life fulfilling? Are you enjoying the journey? Because we should be. What he wanted was enjoyment out of life, but he tried it without God and didn't get it. And it was his Waterloo event in his life. Here's the wisest man in the world and the emptiest one you could meet. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys.